So next up is text decoration. We're going to make the next few a little bit quicker, just because by this point you should be able to create the elements that we need to test, but also text decoration is not used that often. I often use it to set it to none, where we'll set up a link tag, and the link tag, as you know, has a underline and is blue by default, but sometimes people don't like that on their screen or on their pages and their projects. So you go into that A tag and you set a rule saying set the text decoration to none. I just want to show you how to work it, since even though you're not often adding underlines to things, you're often removing them, it's nice to know that you have the option. So for step one, we're going to create an h4 tag and a style tag. And a style tag. Give ourselves some room. We're going to create a CSS rule. Now, moving a little fast, jumping back and forth, feel free to pause. And the way I would do it is I would pause here, and then I would complete 1, 2, 3, and try to come up with this. And then if you're still struggling with getting the syntax right, go ahead and give it a shot, and then watch me kind of like sprint through it. You'll be able to catch to see if, for example, you did something like this, or other common errors I see is this one where you forget the closing tag on the initial style tag, or you forget the closing slash here. Any number of different syntactical errors could be the case. Or, you know, a harder one to spot is that you use an H3 here, and then you're making a rule for H4. Guess what? Nothing's going to happen to this element because you're not referencing the right one. They have to match. Or even if you have an H4 over here and H3 over here, that might actually work, but it's not great and it will lead to problems. So consistency is key. Getting the syntax right is key. Removing obvious errors and paying attention to not so obvious errors is an important skill. But anyway, so that was my point. Just pause here, try to recreate it, and then try to catch some mistakes if there are any. Moving on, we're going to add the text decoration property with a value of underline. So inside of our H4 rule, which we've referenced, we're going to write text decoration, spelled correctly. This is a common gotcha. I see something wrong here. As we see, our syntax has the wrong color. I think decoration is spelled wrong now. Spelling is not my strong suit, as you all will definitely see. But the syntax not being the right color was my first clue, and then I thought, well, maybe I spelled it wrong. So let's try that again from scratch. Text decoration. There we go. And we're going to set that to underline. Boom. So we've completed steps 1, 2, and 3. And now we're going to play around a little bit inside of the code pen. If you have this all written out, you're in great shape, but we're going to try it again in the challenge, in the actual HTML panel. So let's change this H4 right here. I am an H4. Here's the reference. Here's a property. And here's the value. And we're going to change it to none. You see the underline goes away. A different value. Try out any of these is overline, which puts it over. Line through. Again, these are not very commonly used, but it's good to know. Something's wrong with line through. Must be a mistake on my end as far as the written code. No. You'll see that if you just write line through, nothing will happen. It'll stay in its default state. But if you add the dash, then it's written correctly and you're good to go. You can even combine them. Not commonly used, but it's cool to see. If we do an overline, a space, underline. Let's do it the way I've written it actually. Now we're going to talk about this a lot more with border, but you can write several different values for certain properties, and text decoration is one of them. It can take multiple values. All you need is a space in between. So we see that there's an underline. I'm going to add an overline and a line through. And then last but not least, let's get a little wild and set the underline to a different color. I'm going to set it to blue, see what happens. A blue underline with the overline, and then whatever wavy means. Feel free to use that in any of your projects. I haven't had a use case myself yet, but now you know the different property values that the text decoration property has. And let's move on to the challenge. So create an H5 with an underline. Boom. Create an H5. This is an H5. And let's set an underline. We know that we need to create our style tag in order to use a CSS property. Give ourselves some room. And now what do? We reference the H5, give ourselves room to work, and we're going to say an underline. So we know that the property in question here is the text decoration property, and it's going to take a value of underline. Cool. Now for the advanced piece. I am going to erase it, so just if you have this, you're done. The next part is just a little bit of a preview of how we're going to work later on, not only in the code pen, but also in Glitch, because we are going to be separating our work. One file for the HTML and one file for the CSS. I just wanted to show you a little bit of how that works. Let's try to make this H5 underlined using this CSS panel. So we see that our H5 is regular right here. So imagine this CSS panel as the contents of the style tag without having to write the style tag. You can just write your styles ready to go. So what's the first thing we do when we create a style tag? Once we're inside, right? We no longer need the style tag when you're in the CSS panel or the CSS file. So I'm going to reference my H5 and I'm going to call the text decoration property, and I'm going to set it to underline. And you see that it happened. Long story short, the reason that we separate our files from one to the other is for cleanliness, organization. It's the professional way to do it. The style tag embedded in the HTML tag is just for learning, not commonly used. The professional best practices way to do this is to write your HTML in the HTML panel and the CSS in the other one. So if you were able to complete the advanced challenge, great. This is how we're going to do it in the next few lessons. But for now, in the next one, we're going to jump right back to using the style tag. That was just the preview. So that's it for text decoration, and I will see you in the next lesson.